A medical condition. She's got a medical condition. I was in the middle of the entire trip because of you.
Look at this.
Yeah.
Is that new? Huh? What is all that?
Oh, it's kind of personal. I don't share it with everybody.
Then why didn't you put it on your ass?
So yeah, if you've never watched Curb Your Enthusiasm before, you're probably thinking this guy's just an idiot. And to be fair, that's exactly what Larry David wants you to think.
3 days now. I've gotten the results back from my cancer test. Not one of you bothered to call me and ask me if I got the results back.
Larry David is a comedian and one of the co-creators of Seinfeld, which is already enough to tell you he knows exactly what he's doing. But what makes him different from most comedians is that he doesn't try to be likable at all.
Who is Larry David?
This guy.
The thing about Larry is that he spent almost a decade being completely invisible. Born in Brooklyn in 1947, Larry grew up in a Jewish middle-class household in Sheepshead Bay. Nothing crazy. He was just a normal guy, and throughout his early career, he was trying to be a stand-up comedian, performing in tiny clubs in New York, getting on stage, and then this is the part that's hard to believe, just walking off. Most people would call that a career-ending move. Larry David did it repeatedly, but here's what that tells you about who Larry actually is. He was never performing for approval. Even when he had nothing, he still wasn't going to compromise what he thought was funny just to get a laugh from a crowd he didn't respect. Most people spend their whole lives chasing validation. Larry was rejecting it before he even had anything to lose, and then almost accidentally, he ended up at Saturday Night Live. In 1984, he got hired as a writer for SNL. He was there for 1 season. He had almost no material make it to air, and by all accounts, it was a disaster, so he quit. But what happened next is what matters, because instead of that failure breaking him, it led him directly to the guy who would change everything, Jerry Seinfeld. The story of how Seinfeld got made is almost as funny as the show itself. Larry and Jerry were both doing stand-up in New York, and they started talking, and somewhere in that conversation was the seed of the greatest sitcom ever made.
How could you kill that girl? What's the matter with you? Why did you do that? She saw it in syndication and she called me up. You know, I really like that show.
NBC gave them almost nothing to work with at first. The pilot, originally called The Seinfeld Chronicles, was so uncommercial that network executives reportedly said there was no relatable characters and it would never work. One executive famously said it was just 4 people who had no interest in anyone but themselves, and they were right. That was exactly the point.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, of course not.
Larry was the head writer and showrunner for the first 7 seasons, and what he built was essentially a sitcom where nothing is learned, nobody grows, and being petty is treated with the same dramatic weight as a life crisis, because to Larry David, it is a life crisis. Larry left Seinfeld after season 7. He walked away from the biggest show on television at its absolute peak. He just felt like he'd said what he wanted to say, and so he left. And then came Curb Your Enthusiasm. What started as an HBO comedy special in 1999 became something nobody had really seen on television before. A semi-improvised show where Larry David plays a fictional version of himself stumbling through Los Angeles, offending literally everyone he meets.
Oh my God!
Wow. What did you do?
What did I do? You plopped down on the couch.
I didn't plop.
You plopped.
She plopped.
There's no script in the traditional sense. The actors are given a scene outline, here's what needs to happen, here's where it ends up, and then they're just let loose. Which means every single moment you're watching is real discomfort being actually felt in real time by real people. And Larry plays himself, a rich retired TV writer living in LA who cannot get through a single day without a social situation turning into a full-blown conflict. He tells a grieving widow she can't use his bathroom. He accidentally starts a beef with a chef over a plate of fish, and he does all of this with complete conviction, like he is the reasonable one in every situation. That's the key to why the show works. Larry is always at least partially right. That's the genius of it. He's not just being difficult for the sake of it, he's pointing at something real, something we all see and choose to ignore because it's easier. Most of us notice when someone cuts the line. Larry turns it into a 20-minute conversation that ruins an entire dinner party.
You know what? You can all go fuck yourself. Oh shit.
Okay, so let's actually talk about what makes Larry David a genius, because it's easy to watch Curb Your Enthusiasm and think the joke is just awkward man causes problems, but that's not what's actually happening. What Larry David has spent his entire career doing, from Seinfeld to Curb to every stand-up set and every interview, is exposing the performance of social life. Think about it. Every single day you perform. You perform being polite when you don't want to. You laugh at a joke you didn't find funny because the room laughed and you didn't want to be the one person who didn't. We all do this constantly because it's how society functions. Larry David just doesn't, or more precisely, the character of Larry David just doesn't. And by watching someone refuse to do the performance, you suddenly see the performance for what it is. There's a term for this in philosophy. It's called breaching. The sociologist Harold Garfinkel used to have his students deliberately break small social norms, stand too close to someone in an elevator, respond to "how are you" with a completely honest, detailed answer about your actual mental state, just to reveal how rigid and constructed those norms actually are. Larry does this for 30 minutes an episode for 11 seasons and gets paid millions of dollars to do it. But it's not just the rule breaking that makes him a genius, it's what he's actually saying underneath it. Because what Larry David's work keeps coming back to again and again is the idea that most social conflict doesn't come from bad people, it comes from ambiguity, from the fact that we all have slightly different ideas of what's acceptable and nobody ever says it out loud. Larry David says the rules out loud. That's it. That's the whole show. And here's where it gets really interesting, because Larry is often wrong too, not about the rule, about the escalation. He identifies the real thing and then pursues it so far past the point of reason that he creates something 10 times worse than what he was originally complaining about, which obviously is deeply human. We've all done a version of it. We've all been right about something small and then handled it so badly that we became the problem. Larry David just does it louder and in front of a camera crew. And what makes him different from just a guy who causes problems is the self-awareness underneath it. In interviews, Larry is sharp and genuinely funny in a quieter way than the character. He knows exactly what he's doing. The other thing that separates him from almost every other comedian of his generation is how little he needs you to like him. Most comedy is fundamentally about connection. The comedian wants you to laugh. Larry David seems genuinely indifferent to whether you're on his side or not. He'll make the argument he believes is correct and let you decide, and somehow that indifference is exactly what pulls you in. In an industry that constantly pressures people to evolve or to stay relevant, Larry David has stayed stubbornly himself for 40 years, and it worked. So, is Larry David a genius? I mean, yeah,